Johnny Carson was in the middle of his opening monologue when he saw a face in the audience that made him stop mid-sentence. Row 7, seat 12. A man in clothes that were too big for him, hair unkempt, face weathered by years on the streets. But Johnny knew that face. He'd known it for 30 years. The audience thought Johnny had forgotten his joke. Ed McMahon was looking concerned. But Johnny was staring at Tommy Reynolds, his best friend from the Navy, the man who'd saved his life in 1945, the man who'd been his best man at his wedding, the man Johnny hadn't seen in 20 years, the man who was now homeless. And what Johnny did when the camera stopped rolling would change both their lives forever. It was April 18th, 1985 at NBC Studio One in Burbank, California. The Tonight Show was taping as usual. Audience packed in. Johnny delivering his monologue with that perfect timing everyone loved. He was making a joke about Reagan's latest press conference when his eyes swept across the audience in that casual way performers do, making everyone feel included. That's when he saw Tommy. For a moment, Johnny's brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. The joke died in his throat. His smile faltered. He just stood there staring at row 7. The audience started to shift uncomfortably. This wasn't like Johnny Carson. He never missed a beat. He never lost his place. Ed McMahon leaned forward slightly, ready to jump in if needed. "Tommy," Johnny said quietly, almost himself, then louder, "Tommy Reynolds." A man in the 7th row started to sink lower in his seat, as if trying to disappear. But it was too late. Johnny had already started walking toward him, microphone still in hand, completely abandoning the monologue. "Tommy, is that you?" Johnny asked, his voice different now, not the smooth TV host voice, something raw and real. The man stood slowly. He was thin, maybe 60 pounds lighter than he should have been. His jacket was worn, his shoes held together with duct tape. His face was tanned from too much sun, lined with years of hard living. But his eyes, when he looked at Johnny, his eyes were unmistakable. "Yeah, Johnny," Tommy said, his voice rough. "It's me." The studio was dead silent. 300 people holding their breath, not understanding what they were witnessing, but knowing it was important. Johnny reached Tommy's row and just stood there for a moment looking at his old friend. Then he did something unprecedented. He turned to the director. "Cut the cameras. Clear the studio. Everybody out now." The director hesitated. They were in the middle of taping. There were schedules, union rules, a whole show to record. But something in Johnny's face made the decision easy. Cut cameras. Clear the studio. For the first time in Tonight Show history, the audience was asked to leave mid-taping. There were confused murmurs. But the audience coordinator started ushering people out. The crew began shutting down equipment. Within 10 minutes, the studio was empty, except for Johnny, Tommy, Ed McMahon, and a few key staff members who Johnny trusted implicitly. Johnny sat down in the audience seat next to Tommy, not on stage, not in control, just two men sitting side by side in a TV studio. "What happened to you?" Johnny asked quietly. Tommy's face crumpled. "Everything, Johnny. Everything happened." The story came out in pieces. How after the war, Tommy had struggled with what they now call PTSD, but back then was just called being difficult or unstable. How he'd married, had 2 kids, worked construction for 20 years. How the nightmares never stopped. The USS Pennsylvania, the kamikaze attack, pulling Johnny's unconscious body out of the twisted metal while the ship burned around them. "I still dream about it," Tommy whispered. "Every night. The fire, the screaming, the smell." Johnny nodded. He understood. He had his own nightmares from that day. Tommy continued. His marriage fell apart in 1965. His wife took the kids to Oregon. He started drinking to quiet the dreams. Lost his job, lost his apartment, lost contact with everyone, including Johnny. He was too ashamed to reach out, too proud to admit he'd failed. "I've been on the streets for 3 years," Tommy said, "living under the 405 freeway. My sister Sarah, she found me last week, begged me to come tonight, bought the ticket with money she didn't have. I told her it was stupid, that you wouldn't even notice me, that you'd probably forgotten all about me." "Forgotten?" Johnny's voice broke. "Tommy, you saved my life. I've thought about you every single year on April 7th. That's the day you pulled me out. I tried to find you in 68. Hired a private investigator. He said you'd disappeared. I thought maybe you didn't want to be found. I didn't, Tommy admitted. I was ashamed. Look at me, Johnny. You're on TV every night. You're successful, famous. And he gestured at his worn clothes. I'm this. Johnny put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. You're Tommy Reynolds, the bravest man I ever knew, the man who risked his life to save mine. That doesn't change because you've had hard times. Ed McMahon, who'd been standing quietly nearby, spoke up. Tommy, Johnny talks about you. I've heard the story 100 times. The Navy, the kamikaze, how you went back into the fire 3 times to pull guys out. Tommy wiped his eyes. That was a long time ago. Character doesn't expire, Johnny said firmly. Listen to me. You're not sleeping under a freeway anymore. That's over tonight. Right now, it's over. Johnny, I can't ask you. You're not asking. I'm telling you. I'm going to get you help. Real help. Medical care. Therapy for the PTSD. A place to live. Whatever you need. Tommy shook his head. I've tried programs before. I always end up back on the streets because you were trying alone. Johnny said, this time you're not alone. This time you've got me and Ed and everyone who works here. We're not letting you fail. Johnny turned to his producer. Get me Dr. Frank Morrison on the phone. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him I need a bed at his veterans program tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. The producer nodded and rushed off. Johnny, I don't deserve this. Tommy protested. Johnny's voice got sharp. You dove into burning wreckage to pull me out. You spent 3 hours doing CPR on Jimmy Chin until the medics arrived. You saved 14 men that day, Tommy. 14. And you think you don't deserve help? That was my job. Your job was to abandon ship. Everyone else did. You went back. That's not a job. That's heroism. Tommy was crying openly now. I'm so tired, Johnny. I'm so tired of fighting. Then stop fighting, Johnny said gently. Let us help you. Let me repay the debt I've owed you for 40 years. Dr. Frank Morrison called back within 10 minutes. He ran a specialized program for veterans with PTSD, addiction issues, and homelessness. I have a bed, Dr. Morrison said. Bring him tonight. We'll do a full medical evaluation and start treatment immediately. Johnny looked at Tommy. You'll go? Tommy nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Good, Ed, call my driver. Tell him to get the car ready. I'm taking Tommy myself. Ed made the call while Johnny sat with his old friend. They talked about the war, about the good times they'd had on shore leave in San Francisco, about the letters they'd exchanged for 20 years before contact was lost. Why'd you stop writing? Johnny asked. I was embarrassed, Tommy admitted. Your letters were about your success, the shows, the fame. My letters were about construction jobs, and cry myself to sleep. I felt like I was dragging you down. You never dragged me down, Johnny said. Tommy, you were my hero. You still are. Success doesn't mean anything if I can't help the people who helped me get here. Johnny's driver arrived. Before they left, Johnny did something else unprecedented. He called his personal lawyer. I want you to set up a trust fund, $50,000. Thomas Reynolds is the beneficiary. He can access it for housing, medical care, education, whatever he needs. But it's structured so he can't blow it all at once. Monthly distributions supervised by Dr. Morrison's program. Tommy tried to protest, but Johnny stopped him. You gave me my life back in 1945. The least I can do is give you a chance at yours in 1985. They drove to Dr. Morrison's facility in Pasadena. It was a beautiful place, not institutional or depressing. A converted mansion with gardens and therapy rooms and individual bedrooms. Tommy kept touching the car's leather seats like he couldn't believe they were real. At the facility, Dr. Morrison greeted them personally. He was a veteran himself, Vietnam era, and he understood what men like Tommy had been through. Mr. Reynolds, we're going to take care of you. Medical evaluation tonight. Start therapy tomorrow. We'll address the PTSD, the addiction, all of it. This is a 6-month program minimum. Are you ready to commit? Tommy looked at Johnny. What if I fail? Then we try again, Johnny said simply. As many times as it takes. Tommy turned to Dr. Morrison. Okay, I'm ready. Johnny stayed while they got Tommy checked in, made sure he had everything he needed. Before he left, Tommy grabbed his hand. Johnny, why are you doing this? Really? Johnny's answer was immediate and honest. Because 40 years ago, you didn't leave me behind. Brothers don't leave brothers behind. And you're my brother, Tommy. You always have been. The drive back to the studio was quiet. Johnny sat in the back of his car and cried. Not sad tears, relief tears, gratitude tears. For 20 years, he'd wondered what happened to Tommy Reynolds. For 3 of those years, Tommy had been living on the streets, probably within 10 miles of the studio. The thought of how close they'd been, yet how lost Tommy had been, was almost too much to bear. The next day, Johnny called Tommy's sister, Sarah. She'd been the one who bought the ticket, who got Tommy to the studio. I can't ever thank you enough, Johnny told her. If you hadn't done that, I might never have known. Sarah cried on the phone. I was so scared he'd cause a scene that security would throw him out, that you wouldn't remember him. I could never forget him, Johnny said. Never. Johnny visited Tommy at the facility every week, quietly without press or photographers, just 2 old friends talking, sometimes about the war, sometimes about nothing important at all. The visits weren't charity. They were genuine friendship picked up after 20 years like no time had passed. Tommy's recovery was hard. The first 2 weeks, he almost left 3 times. The detox was brutal. The therapy brought up memories he'd spent decades trying to bury. But Dr. Morrison's team was skilled, and Johnny's consistent presence made a difference. Every time Tommy wanted to quit, Johnny reminded him of the USS Pennsylvania. You didn't quit when the ship was burning. You're not quitting now. After 3 months, Tommy was a different man. Healthy weight, clear eyes. The nightmares hadn't stopped, but he had tools to manage them now. Therapy, medication, support groups with other veterans who understood. After 6 months, Tommy graduated from the program. Dr. Morrison had never seen a more dramatic transformation. He did the work. Dr. Morrison told Johnny, you gave him the chance, but he did the work. Johnny set Tommy up in a small apartment in Van, New York. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. He also found Tommy a job through a friend who owned a construction company. Tommy was 60 years old, but he could still work. And working gave him dignity, purpose. A year after that night at the Tonight Show, Tommy came back to the studio. This time, as Johnny's invited guest, he looked healthy, happy, alive. He wore a new suit that Johnny had insisted on buying him. When Johnny introduced him to the audience, he told the whole story. The kamikaze attack, the rescue, the 20 years of lost contact, finding Tommy homeless in the audience. This man saved my life, Johnny told the viewers. And last year, I got the chance to return the favor. Tommy Reynolds is a hero, not because he pulled me out of a burning ship, although he did that. He's a hero because he fought his way back from a darkness most of us can't imagine. He's been sober for a year. He's working. He's living. And I'm proud to call him my friend. The audience gave Tommy a standing ovation. Tommy stood there, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the support from strangers. After the show, Tommy told Johnny, you didn't have to do all this. Tell everyone my story. Yes, I did, Johnny said, because there are thousands of men like you, veterans who came, home broken and got forgotten. If telling your story helps even one of them reach out for help, it's worth it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations contacted NBC. The VA received thousands of calls from veterans or their families seeking help. Tommy's story became a catalyst for change, for awareness, for support. Tommy Reynolds lived another 15 years. He stayed sober. He reconnected with his kids who thought he was dead. He became a volunteer at Dr. Morrison's facility, helping other veterans navigate their own recovery. He and Johnny remained close until Johnny's retirement in 1992. When Johnny Carson died in 2005, Tommy Reynolds was one of the bearers. At the funeral, he told a reporter, Johnny saved my life. Not in 1985. In 1945. He just didn't know it. After I pulled him out of that fire, I had nightmares for decades. But every time I want to give up, I remember that I saved Johnny Carson, that my life meant something, that I'd done at least one thing that mattered. Johnny gave my life meaning before he even knew my name. And then 40 years later, he gave me my life back. The Tonight Show never aired the footage from April 18th, 1985. The episode was rescheduled, and they taped a new monologue the next day. But everyone who was there that night remembered it. The night Johnny Carson stopped being a TV host and became just Johnny, a man who recognized his friend, who stopped everything, who proved that fame hadn't changed what mattered most. The story became legend among Tonight Show crew. Whenever a new employee started, someone would eventually tell them about the night Johnny cleared the studio, about Tommy Reynolds, about the reminder that success isn't measured in ratings or money, but in whether you remember the people who helped you along the way. Johnny Carson never spoke publicly about what he did for Tommy, except for that one episode where he invited him as a guest. He considered it private, personal, but Tommy spoke about it often. He gave talks at VA hospitals. He shared his story at AA meetings. He became an advocate for homeless veterans. I was invisible for 3 years. Tommy would say, living on the streets, people looking through me like I wasn't there. But Johnny saw me in a studio with 300 people in the middle of a monologue. He saw me. That's the moment my life changed. Not because he gave me money or a place to live, though he did those things. My life changed because someone saw me. Someone remembered my name. Someone reminded me that I mattered. The lesson of Tommy Reynolds and Johnny Carson isn't about celebrity charity or dramatic rescues. It's simpler and more profound than that. It's about not forgetting where you came from, about honoring the people who shaped your life, about stopping even in the middle of success to recognize someone who needs recognition. Johnny Carson recognized Tommy Reynolds in row 7, C12. But more importantly, he recognized what Tommy represented, a debt that could never fully be repaid, a friendship that transcended decades and circumstance, a promise made 40 years earlier on a burning ship. Brothers don't leave brothers behind. Johnny kept that promise. And Tommy Reynolds got to live his last 15 years with dignity, purpose, and the knowledge that he hadn't been forgotten, that the life he saved in 1945 had in turn saved his in 1985. Sometimes heroism isn't about running into fires. Sometimes it's about recognizing a face in the audience. Sometimes it's about stopping everything, clearing the studio, and remembering that friendship is more important than television. Sometimes it's about giving someone a second chance when they've run out of chances. Johnny Carson gave Tommy Reynolds that chance, and Tommy took it, and both men were better for.